The wind that night cut through Marcus Hale's thin jacket like a blade, sharp and personal, as if winter itself had chosen him for punishment. February in their small Ohio town didn't just bring cold, it brought a kind of quiet that made you aware of everything you didn't have. The streetlights flickered above cracked sidewalks, and the grocery store sign buzzed faintly. Behind them, as Marcus stepped out with a single plastic bag, swinging from his wrist. Inside the bag was a loaf of discounted bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a half-gallon of milk. He had stood in the aisle for nearly 10 minutes debating whether he could justify buying a small pack of hot dogs. But the total would have crossed the line in his mind. $18. That was all he had left. Not just in his pocket, left in the world, it felt like. Lily skipped beside him, her pink boots splashing through shallow puddles of melted snow. She was 6 years old, too young to understand overdue notices and bank balances, but old enough to feel when things were tight. She looked up at him with wide brown eyes that mirrored his own. "Daddy, can we get hot chocolate?" she asked, pointing toward the cafe across the street. Through the wide windows, people sat laughing, steam rising from ceramic mugs, their cheeks warm and pink. Marcus followed her gaze and felt a twist in his chest. He imagined the two of them inside. Lily's nose dusted with whipped cream, her giggles filling the air. The cost of 2 hot chocolates would be almost $9, half of everything he had. "Maybe next week, Peanut," he said gently, brushing a curl from her face. She nodded, accepting it without complaint. That was the part that hurt the most. She never complained. They walked toward the bus stop parking lot, where Marcus had parked his rusted sedan. The car had started making a grinding noise that worried him, but worrying about it wouldn't fix it. He had picked up 2 small landscaping jobs that week, trimming hedges and clearing debris from a foreclosed property. The money from those jobs had barely covered groceries and part of the water bill. As they crossed the dimly lit lot, Marcus noticed someone sitting on the curb near the bus shelter. At first, he assumed it was one of the usual transients who sometimes passed through town. But something about this man made Marcus slow down. The stranger's coat was expensive, wool tailored, but it was smeared with dirt. His trousers were creased, though damp at the hem. His shoes were high-end leather, the kind Marcus had only seen in advertisements, now scuffed and wet from slush. His dark hair clung to his forehead from melting snow, and there was a tension in his posture that didn't match the typical slump of someone accustomed to street life. The man looked up as Marcus and Lily approached. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, scanning quickly. But beneath that was something raw, embarrassment, maybe even desperation. "Excuse me," the stranger said, rising slowly to his feet. His voice was steady but carried strain. "I know this sounds crazy, but I've been robbed. My wallet, my phone, everything's gone. I just need enough for a bus ticket to Columbus so I can get home." Marcus instinctively tightened his grip on Lily's hand. He'd heard variations of this story before. Gas money, lost wallet, sick mother. It was almost always a lie. "I can repay you," the man added quickly. "If you give me your address, I'll mail it. I promise." Marcus hesitated. The envelope in his jacket pocket suddenly felt heavier than it should. $18. It was survival money. It was gas. It was 3 days of stretching meals. It was safety. He looked at the stranger more closely. The man's pride was evident. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't pushy. He looked like someone who hated asking for help but had run out of options. Lily tugged gently at Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, he looks cold." Marcus glanced down at her. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't suspicious. She simply saw someone hurting. He swallowed and turned back to the man. "How much is the ticket?" $17 and some change, the stranger replied, almost apologetically. 17. The number landed like a punch. Marcus could say no. He had every reason to say no. He was barely holding things together as it was. No one would blame him. No one would even know. But he did know. He knew what it felt like to stand on the edge of asking for help and having no one answer. He knew what it felt like when Lily's mother left 3 years ago, when bills stacked up and the silence in the house felt suffocating. He remembered sitting at the kitchen table, staring at numbers that didn't add up. wondering how pride and hunger could wrestle so violently inside one person. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out the worn envelope. The bills inside were creased and soft from being handled too many times. A $10 bill, a 5 3-1s. He stared at them for a long moment, calculating and recalculating imaginary scenarios in his mind. Maybe he'd get another job tomorrow. Maybe the landlord would give him a few extra days. Maybe something would work out. Maybe, he extended his hand. It's 18, Marcus said quietly. Get something to eat too. The stranger didn't move at first. He just stared at the money as if it might disappear. Sir, I don't even know your name. Marcus, he replied. And this is Lily. The man straightened fully now, holding the bills carefully. My name is Daniel. I won't forget this. Marcus gave a small shrug, uncomfortable with the weight of gratitude in the air. Just get home safe. There was a long pause, a silent exchange of understanding between two grown men who recognized something familiar in each other. Then Marcus took Lily's hand and walked toward their car. As they drove away, Lily watched through the back window until the bus shelter disappeared from view. Are we going to be okay, Daddy? She asked softly. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, the fuel gauge hovering dangerously close to empty. He forced confidence into his voice. Yeah, Peanut. We'll be okay. But as they pulled into their driveway, and the porch light flickered weakly above peeling paint, doubt crept in. Inside, the house felt colder than the air outside. He set the groceries on the counter and made Lily a peanut butter sandwich with extra care, cutting it diagonally because she liked it that way. Later, after tucking her into bed beneath mismatched blankets, Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table. The empty envelope lay in front of him. He had nothing left now, not even the illusion of a cushion. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the cracked ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind against the siding. Maybe he had been foolish. Maybe he had just made their situation worse. But somewhere deep beneath the anxiety and fear, there was a small, stubborn warmth, a quiet certainty that even if the world was harsh, he didn't want it to change who he was or what Lily learned from watching him. With that thought, Marcus turned off the kitchen light and lay down on the couch, the cold pressing in around him, unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but certain of one thing. He had chosen kindness when it cost him everything. The pounding on the door wasn't the kind that neighbors used. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was firm, rhythmic, official. Marcus's eyes flew open as the sound echoed through the small house, rattling the thin wood and vibrating through the walls. For a split second he thought he was dreaming. Then it came again, 3 heavy knocks that seemed to carry authority. He pushed himself up from the couch, his back aching from another night spent on worn cushions. Pale morning light leaked through the torn edge of the curtain. His heart began to race. Daddy. Lily's small voice called from her bedroom. It's okay, he said automatically, though nothing about the sound felt okay. Then he heard something else. Engines. Not one, several, though powerful, synchronized. Marcus moved slowly toward the front window and lifted the curtain, just enough to peek outside. His breath caught in his throat. 5 black SUVs lined the street in front of his house, their glossy exteriors reflecting the gray sky. They didn't belong in this neighborhood of chipped paint and rusted fences. The vehicles were spotless, intimidating and out of place. 2 men in dark suits stood near the lead SUV, speaking into earpieces. Another adjusted his tie while scanning the surroundings. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson stood frozen on her porch in her bathrobe. 2 houses down, a teenager held up his phone, recording. Marcus's stomach dropped. Had he missed something? A bill, a mistake? Was this some kind of legal issue? His mind raced through every possible worst-case scenario. The knock came again. He swallowed and walked to the door, each step heavy. He cracked it open, cautiously. Marcus Hale? One of the suited men asked. Marcus nodded slowly. Before the man could continue, the rear door of the second SUV opened. A tall figure stepped out, clean-cut. Sharp navy suit, polished shoes gleaming against the damp pavement. His posture was confident now, no trace of last night's vulnerability. Marcus blinked. Daniel, but not the exhausted, snow-soaked stranger from the bus stop. This Daniel looked powerful, composed, in control. "Good morning, Marcus," Daniel said with a warm smile as he approached. Marcus opened the door wider, confusion clouding his face. "Am I in trouble?" Daniel chuckled lightly. "Quite the opposite." The suited men stepped aside respectfully as Daniel walked up the small, cracked pathway toward the porch. Up close, he looked even more put together than Marcus remembered, like someone accustomed to boardrooms and private flights. "May I come in?" Daniel asked. Marcus hesitated for a split second before nodding. "It's not much." Daniel stepped inside without judgment, glancing briefly around the modest living room, the patched couch, the peeling wallpaper, the old television balanced on a crate. His expression didn't show pity. It showed something else, thoughtfulness. Lily peeked around her bedroom doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Daniel noticed her and smiled gently. "Hi, Lily." She looked at her father. "Daddy, that's the cold man." Marcus nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "Yeah, it is." Daniel turned back to Marcus. "I owe you an explanation." Marcus crossed his arms instinctively. "That would help." Daniel inhaled. "Yesterday I wasn't entirely honest. I wasn't robbed." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I was conducting an evaluation," Daniel continued calmly. "I own a company called Heartwell Innovations. We run something called the Humanity Forward Initiative. I travel anonymously across different towns to see how people respond to someone they believe can offer them nothing." Marcus stared at him, disbelief mixing with irritation. "So what, this was a game?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, it's research and investment. I believe character matters more than resumes. But character only reveals itself when there's nothing to gain." Marcus's voice lowered. "You asked for $17. "And you had 18, Daniel replied softly. "My team confirmed it this morning." Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "You checked my account." "Public records, utility filings, rental status," Daniel clarified. "We're thorough. You're behind on rent. Utilities overdue. 2 part-time jobs. No criminal record. No debts beyond basic survival." Silence filled the room. "And you still gave everything," Daniel said. "Not because you expected anything, not because anyone was watching, but because your daughter said I looked cold." Lily stepped closer to her father, sensing the intensity in the air. Daniel crouched to her height. "You reminded your dad to help me." "That was very brave." She nodded shyly. Daniel stood again and motioned toward one of the men waiting at the door. The man entered with a leather folder and handed it to Daniel. "Marcus Hale," Daniel said clearly, "on behalf of Heartwell Innovations and the Humanity Forward Initiative, I'd like to offer you something." Marcus blinked. "What kind of something?" "First, we're paying your outstanding rent for the year. It's already processed." He handed Marcus a document. "Your landlord received confirmation this morning." Marcus's hands trembled as he took the paper. "Second," Daniel continued, "your utilities are covered for 12 months. That includes electricity, water, and heating." Marcus felt dizzy. "And third," Daniel said, his voice steady but warm, "we'd like to offer you a full-time position as regional operations supervisor at our Columbus facility. Salary begins at $75,000 annually. Full benefits. Health coverage for you and Lily. Paid time off." The words felt unreal. "Why?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "Why me?" Daniel's expression softened. "Because you demonstrated something money can't buy. Integrity under pressure. Compassion when it cost you something real." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I just didn't want her to think the world was cruel." Daniel stepped closer. "The world can be cruel, but people like you balance it." Outside, movement caught Marcus's eye. Through the window, he saw workers unloading boxes from the SUVs. One team carried in a brand-new refrigerator. Another measured the front porch. A contractor examined the roof. "What is all that?" Marcus asked, stunned. "Your house needs repairs," Daniel replied matter-of-factly. "We handle that too." Lily tugged Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, are we moving?" Marcus let out a shaky laugh, tears finally spilling over. "I don't think so, Peanut." Daniel extended his hand. "All we ask in return is that you continue being exactly who you are. And show up Monday." Marcus stared at the hand. Just yesterday, that same man had stood shivering under a bus shelter, asking for help. Now he stood in his living room, offering stability, security, a future. Marcus gripped Daniel's hand firmly. "I don't even know what to say," he admitted. "Say yes," Daniel replied with a grin. Marcus nodded, emotion overwhelming him. Yes. Outside, the SUVs gleamed under the growing sunlight. Neighbors whispered, trying to understand what miracle had just unfolded on their quiet street. Inside the small house, something shifted, like the weight of constant fear had finally lifted. Marcus looked down at Lily, who was staring wide-eyed at the new refrigerator being carried in. "We're okay," he said softly, this time meaning it. He realized then that it had never been about $18. It had been about who he chose to be when $18 was everything. And that choice had changed his life forever.